0 to 60 can define a performance car, but it's the fastest 60 to 0 that's the aim of Tarok's brakes. From road cars to race cars, circuits, special stages, or the autostrada, nothing reduces speed like Tarok's brakes. Italy gave the world the art of Da Vinci and Michelangelo. Tarok's has given drivers the art of stopping. For more information and to acquire your own masterpiece, visit tarox.co.uk. Yes, it's me, Mark Stone, and this is the Backseat Driver Podcast. It's the fastest, it's the friendliest, and it's for all the family. The Gas Shocks 116 Trophy and 120 Coupe Cup are the fastest growing race series in the UK, taking in 6 one-hour races and 8 sprints at all the top circuits. Visit 116trophy.com to find out more and get yourself behind the wheel. From a pot of tea to TT motorbikes. From a classic English breakfast to a full serving of classic cars. Bridge House Tea Rooms is the Northwest premier classic car meeting location for cars, bikes, tractors and owners clubs. So no matter what your automotive appetite might be, visit Bridge House Farm Tea Rooms on their Facebook page or call John and Alicia on 07980 444 221 for show details and to reserve your own table and parking space. I'd like to introduce to the Backseat Driver radio show Malcolm Mackay. Malcolm was one of my editors years ago when I used to write for the classic car magazines, but how times changed. Malcolm, welcome to the Backseat Driver radio show.
Thank you, Mark. It's a great pleasure to be with you.
Now, with all what's been going on over the past year or so, there is a dramatic increase in classic car and interesting car ownership because people haven't been going on their holidays, so they've all this money to spend. But what they don't realise is, regrettably, the classic car movement is, to a degree, potentially under threat, which is why your good self and others have started the Historic Classic Vehicles Alliance. Malcolm, what exactly is the Historic Classic Vehicles Alliance and why has it come into being?
Well, thanks, Mark. Yes, it's we call it the HCVA for short, and the reason really is that a group of us from the historic and classic vehicles industry, in all aspects, car restorers, car dealers, journalists, everybody who's involved in the industry and derives their living from it, were concerned that the future for classic cars is not bleak, but there are some threats on the horizon that we really felt need to be addressed before they hit us. Things like restrictions in use coming in with local emission zones, a lot of changes in Europe. Obviously, following Brexit, it's become more difficult to move cars in and out of Europe if you're transporting them, which has affected quite a few people in the trade. Obviously, the availability of fuel longer term, the arrival of E10 fuel and the future for fuels. Quite a few issues that we wanted to get together and form a trade alliance to protect the industry for the future.
Now, the one thing is the classic car movement as a whole, irrespective of how old your classic or interesting car is, generates millions of pounds into this country. And the problem is, him at number 10 and his buddies, and as everybody knows, I dislike all MPs and politicians with equal amounts of venom, so I am not biased. I don't like any of them. Could effectively destroy part of what is actually a valued income into the country's economy.
Well, that's true. I mean, a survey was done recently by Hero, the rally organisers, with an independent survey body, and they calculated that the turnover of the historic vehicle industry is about 18 billion a year, it generates about 3 billion a year in tax for the exchequer. So it is a significant, and there are 110,000 people or thereabouts employed by the industry as well. So it's a pretty significant industry, and let's face it, it's one where Britain leads the world, really. People will bring their cars from America, from Australia, from all over Europe to have them restored in the UK. So we really don't want to see that industry fail.
Now, before we went on air, we were also discussing the e-fuels and the fact that van der Leyen, the head of the EU, made a speech about these alternative or eco-friendly fuels that was very comprehensively misreported in the British press.
Yes, it was. There's an awful lot of confusion. For a start, e-fuels, everybody thinks of biofuels, and no, it's not the same thing. Biofuels obviously are made with biological products. They're derived from cereal crops and require growing a vast amount of cereal crops to produce a relatively small amount of fuel, whereas e-fuels are produced chemically, and if they are produced with the use of clean energy, because obviously electricity is involved in the process of creating them, provided they're produced with, say, wind power or wave power or whatever, they are potentially carbon neutral when burned in existing vehicles. So you don't need to build a new vehicle to run them. You don't need to change over to a battery car. They actually capture carbon dioxide from the atmosphere or from processes like manufacturing industry that create carbon dioxide. And that is then chemically converted into a fuel. And so when it is burned, it releases emissions which are just putting back the CO2 that they took out to make it. It's a very clever technology. Obviously expensive at the moment, but with investment and development, it has a great deal of potential.
Now, we are going to be have E10 fuel dumped on us by September. And one of the great problems with that is, for older cars, even those built up to about 2003, 2004, a lot of owners could be putting the new E10 fuel in and causing problems for their engines, because some of this stuff is not kind to hoses and fuel pumps and engines as a whole, is it?
Yes, that's absolutely true. The ethanol in the E10 fuel can attack some metals, and also the problem with it is that it's more inclined to absorb moisture, which can cause rust in fuel tanks, and it can also break down the rubbers in older fuel pipes. It's possible to replace those. Obviously, you can get new fuel pipe that is resistant to ethanol, but it can catch people out, certainly. But having said that, ethanol in fuel has been a thing for quite a long time in other countries.
Yeah.
Brazil, for decades, they had E70. And there are still plenty of classic cars running around in Brazil, but they have been obviously adapted to cope with it.
Yeah. So, I mean, besides the hoses, I mean, what is like the ultimate disastrous effect that the E10 fuel can have on an older combustion engine?
Well, there is obviously a danger of fire, because where you've got fuel that breaks down a hose pipe or something like that and then escapes, it could be ignited. But having said that, it is something that is a problem if fuel pipes are in poor condition anyway. That can still happen without the ethanol. It just hastens the process. So it's not a case of, oh no, all the old cars are going to suddenly catch fire. It's just a case of being a bit more thorough with maintenance and making sure that the older hoses are replaced sooner rather than later.
Now, to just return to the Historic and Classic Vehicle Alliance, I mean, this organisation, what is it doing as a whole? Because, I mean, it won't be just concentrating on fuel. What is it doing, and how is it making the government aware of the problems they could cause, and the fact that they are potentially turning off the tap to a lot of revenue.
Yeah, well, we are attacking it from sort of two directions, really. One, publicity, getting the word out, and correcting some of the myths and misconceptions about classic vehicles, because we've noticed a bit of a tendency lately that you used to pull up at a petrol station in an old car, and people would say, "Oh, what a lovely old car, fantastic! My dad had one," something like that. Now people are finding that they're getting a certain number of people who are coming over and saying, oh, that's very polluting, isn't it? Now, of course, this is a misconception, because the fact that the car has been preserved and looked after, rather than buying a new car, it's actually more environmentally friendly than the massive amount of damage done but in new vehicle production.
Yeah.
So we're trying to gently reassure people that classic vehicles are not harmful to the environment. And also, obviously, we're engaging with MPs as the alliance grows bigger, and, we are actively recruiting classic car specialists and owners and enthusiasts to join us, because the bigger the alliance is, the more the government is obliged to listen to us. At the moment, they've been very good, where we have contacted MPs, they have listened and they have come back to us. But as the alliance represents more businesses, more employees, more jobs, it obviously becomes more respected, and they really do have to listen.
I mean, one interesting point you made there was that people come up to classic car owners and say that's polluting. I mean, I've always said running a classic car is probably the ultimate form of recycling, because the carbon footprint that classic car made or left behind has already been eliminated many, many years ago.
Exactly.
And the other thing is, I mean, there are more and more people, as new rules and regs are foisted onto us, because regrettably the car owner and the motorist have always been one of the greatest cash cows for any government. Running an older car is, shall we say, becoming a more and more viable proposition for certain people, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, fuels are not expensive at the moment, and obviously with the increase in electric cars on the roads, there is the potential that fuel will get a lot cheaper in the short term. And it may actually be a lot more cost-effective to run an older car. But longer term, obviously, we're facing the threat of restrictions that could affect older vehicles. The road pricing, there's even talk, of course, of the autonomous cars that drive themselves on the motorway. And there have actually been conferences about these where it's been suggested that self-drive vehicles wouldn't be allowed on motorways in future, because the electric ones, the automatic ones, wouldn't be able to cope with somebody with a brain steering what would happen, which is a bit of a shocking prospect, but it has actually been seriously suggested.
I mean, I spoke about it in my news on last week's show, that even the great, I don't name it by name, but it's the electric car manufacturer that begins with T and ends in A. They've already admitted their onboard cameras cannot read certain road signs, and that if they come up behind a European Arctic on the motorway that will have the 90 kilometres an hour maximum speed sticker on the back of the trailer, in the UK, the car automatically reads it as 90 miles per hour and slams its foot down, and off it goes with great gusto, which means it automatically exceeds the speed limit. So it will be interesting to see how the authorities would react to an autonomous car that was speeding because it misread a sign.
That is a very interesting one. I haven't heard that. That's lovely. It's entirely plausible, isn't it?
Yeah. But as we're talking about running a classic car for an everyday car, I mean, not everybody will want to go out and run, shall we say, a classic Mark II Jaguar, although it might be very nice to do it. But there are certain of the little classic cars or older modern cars that are still very viable vehicles. I mean, there's the proper Mini, as I refer to it. You've early Ford Fiestas. I was talking to somebody the other week who runs a 2CV as a daily car because he only does about 30 miles a day, and that is more than within the capabilities of a Citroën 2CV. I mean, if you were going to look at buying a classic car to run frequently, what are the sorts of cars you would go for?
Well, it does depend very much on the sort of journeys that you're doing. And sadly, also these days, it depends on where you live. Because if you live within the rapidly enlarging London ULEZ zone, for example, the low emission zone, which is now about in September to go out as far as the M25, there are a huge number of people who are actually having to sell their mid-age, shall we say, classic cars under the age of 40. Because otherwise they'd have to pay £15, £17 a day to use them. Younger classics, like, for example, an MG ZR over 200, they are exempt from ULEZ. They're considered to be fuel efficient enough, or I should say emissions compliant enough to be exempt. There's a black hole of cars between roughly 15 to 20 and up to 40 years old that are just going to disappear in those circumstances. And yes, that's only London at the moment, but there are emission zones popping up all over the UK that could have a similar effect.
I mean, whilst they say, it is good for the environment and everything else, I mean, call me cynical, but I also look upon these as all of a sudden, besides the government, local authorities have suddenly dropped onto or switched onto, there's some money to be made here.
It does seem a bit that way, doesn't it? And it's most unfair, really. I mean, we're campaigning for at least weekend exemptions, so that people who have a classic, like I mentioned, a younger classic, that isn't exempt, because I should say over 40 years old are exempt from all the ULEZ and their emission zones so far in the UK.
Right.
The younger ones are the ones that have got the problem.
Yeah.
And we feel that at least a weekend exemption would allow people to, because a lot of people obviously living in London, they'll commute by bus, by tube or whatever, but at the weekend they like to get out in their classic car and enjoy it. And they don't want to be paying some huge fee in order to do so. But yet, going back to your question about what are good classics to run every day, I mean, I've just been helping my parents move in with me, and I've been recovering their cars, which they stopped using because they're in their 90s, but they stopped using them only a few years ago. And they had, for the last 40 years, a Morris Minor Traveller and a Jaguar XJ6 from 1973. Now, the Morris Minor Traveller, 1961, very practical, usable car. Obviously, they didn't use it every day, but perfectly suitable for going shopping, going to the church, wherever they wanted to go, and still a very usable car today. Maybe not ideal if you're bombing up and down motorways, but if you're just running around locally, it's an ideal car. And of course, the Jaguar XJ6 was the perfect foil for that, because for a longer journey, it's superbly quiet and comfortable and smooth, and zooms up motorways very happily. So there's a couple of classics as examples.
And the other thing is, with what's happening potentially to classic cars and people who use them every day, I mean, I commentate, I used to, and it's starting to slowly come back, young owners, and I introduced into one of the companies that I commentate for, I extended the final class of the day of 1990 to 2005. And it's absolutely fascinating to see the young people, the young owners, bring their... It's interesting what they say is a classic car, Peugeot 205s, Volkswagen Golfs. But these young owners of these, what they perceive to be a classic car, though it's somewhat alarming to see cars come in the arena as a classic, and I can remember being on the launch of them when they were new. But there is...
Yes, I've been there.
There is genuine passion and enthusiasm, because they now see what you and I have seen in a classic car, is that they are interesting to own. Okay, you might have to work on them a little bit, but they are also more interesting to drive than a modern car.
Yes, very true. And, this is something I've seen as well. I have a 22-year-old son. He's got, his first car was a Rover 200. He still has it and loves it to bits. He's just had it resprayed and done some work on it. He had a Scimitar FS1 1800 Ti.
A bit of a Marmite car with those, weren't they?
They were, but the 1800 Ti with the Nissan Turbo is an extremely fast car as standard.
Yeah.
And he's put a programmable ECU on it. He's done all the electronics. Very clever stuff, and it really flies. Super little car. It's very efficient as well. He still gets 35 mpg.
Right.
And so, yes, and he also has an AMG ZR 160, which is 2002. And again, there's a huge support for those cars out there. There's a club, but mostly it's done through Facebook pages and things like that nowadays, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there are a tremendous following for them.
But as I said, I conclude he will use at least one of these cars on a frequent basis.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
And that is, to my mind, what is to be encouraged, because, where the HCVA is based at Bicester Heritage, of course, is the setup that has been encouraging young people, the heritage skills, to come in and learn how to work on and restore old classic cars. And when I interviewed those guys, they were saying there was a queue around the block of young people wanting to get onto the course, which surprised them. But as time's gone on, it hasn't surprised them, and the queue just doesn't go any shorter.
Yes, it's terrific, and it's the only area, in fact, during lockdown where apprenticeships have held up. There's been a terrible drop in apprenticeships across the country. Nationally, I think it's about a 60% drop during lockdown, but the numbers for historic vehicle apprenticeships have stayed up, which is very encouraging. It's something else that the HCVA is assisting with as much as we can, because obviously young people are the future of the industry and we really want them involved.
Now, of course, as I said when at the start of the interview, you used to be one of my editors because you were the editor of, it was Thoroughbred and Classic Car, was it not?
That's right, yes. Well, that's how it was known overseas. Historically, it started in 1973 as Classic Car magazine. They very quickly changed it to Thoroughbred and Classic Cars. Then they dropped the Thoroughbred and for the UK, but kept it overseas. And it's still going to this day. I was there from 1989 to 98, and thoroughly enjoyed myself, and still write for the magazine now.
Because the other thing is, you've just written a book, have you not, sir?
I have, Mark. Yes, thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, here we go. The absolute barefaced plug for a friend of mine's new book.
Yes, I've written Original Jaguar E-Type, which is a 400-page book detailing all the production changes, which was a fascinating exercise, because the books have been written on E-Type originality before, but people haven't really got under the skin of how Jaguar operated at that time, and they were practicing just-in-time ordering techniques right back in 1961. Abbey Panels, who supplied panels for a lot of Jaguar cars, they said that they would get a phone call at 4 o'clock every afternoon telling them exactly what panels were needed the next day.
Yeah.
And that was from the 60s onwards.
I mean, and the other thing that I dare say it applied to the E-Type as much as it applied to every other Jaguar. Sir William, Bill Lyons, was well known for walking through the shop floor, picking up a washer and saying, "How much does this cost?" "Oh, it's a penny." "Well, you can buy them for a halfpenny, so what are we doing with all these at a penny?" I conclude, like all of them, the Jaguar was built, the E-Type was built to a price.
Yes, indeed. I mean, Bill Lyons was such an incredibly clever guy because, okay, he didn't style the E-Type, but he styled the majority of the Jaguars during the 50s, 60s, 70s. And he was running the company as well. How on earth he managed to do all of that, I will never know. Very clever chap. But yes, they did keep the price of the E-Type down, mainly by using common materials and common parts across the range.
Yeah.
That was what they were very clever at doing. The E-Type rear suspension was designed primarily for the Mark X Jaguar, but it worked extremely well on a sports car too. So that was the clever aspect of it. But my goodness, they in the same way as with the XK120, he initially said, we're only going to make 1,000 of these, so we'll do it as cheaply as possible, hand finish everything, and that'll be fine. And then, of course, surely he saw it coming. There was this fantastic excitement when the car was launched, and 1,000 orders when it was shown at the New York show alone. So they had to massively increase production, and they had to basically re-engineer almost every part of the car so that they could make it more efficiently.
I think the other thing is as well is like the XK120, they were built as what you might call advertising exercises, but they far exceeded expectations. And of course, the other thing that happened is they went racing. And I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, the E-Type became an incredibly successful, and is still an incredibly successful racing car.
Yes, indeed. Yes, absolutely. And a lot of development was done in different areas. And of course, the racing, as they say, racing improves the breed, and it did massively. And there were no end of changes in production, particularly during the 3.8 E-Type production, because it was such a successful race car. It showed up weaknesses that would come in production later, so they were able to address them.
Now, I mean, I know which my favourite E-Type is. It is the Series 1. I just think it's the purity of line. I personally find the V12s, the Series 3, a bit stodgy, but of course they were aimed at the American market. They are all very expensive to buy now, but which of the E-Types, if somebody has a, shall we say, a checkbook with no limit on the end, which is the E-Type Jaguar to go and buy?
Well, if you've got no limit, then the Series 1 Roadster is always going to be the ultimate choice. I'm at the opposite end of the scale, but I like Series 1s like you do, so I managed to buy from America a few years ago a well-used, long disused Series 1 2+2.
Yeah.
Now, aficionados will knock the 2+2, saying, it doesn't have the purity of style of the original coupe. But, when you drive the car, there's so much more space in it.
Yeah.
And any time you stop, to the casual observer, it's an E-Type, and it's still a stunning-looking car. But I feel very privileged to have one. Mine is probably the scruffiest one on the road anywhere. But I've achieved that childhood dream of owning a Series 1 2+2 E-Type.
I think the ironic thing is the 2+2, the +2 became, in my opinion, or from the part of the country that I grew up in, that became the more familiar one that you saw. And I still think, though the Roadster's nice, I think the 2+2 actually has a more elegant line about it.
Well, it's interesting you say that, and some people certainly do feel that way. And I must admit, it is actually quite difficult to tell them apart unless you put them side by side, or particular features that give away the fact that it's a 2+2. You look at the photograph, you have to look for that chrome strip down the side, just to confirm, yes, it is. The doors are a bit longer, and the roof is a little bit higher. But it's still the same car, and it's such a pleasure to own. It really is. And gives a lot of pleasure to other people as well. Yeah.
It's like I said, I mean, I've done for a publication a few surveys as to the classic car dealers, which cars are popular and things like that. And the Mark 1 and Mark 2 Escorts, most dealers would love to find a warehouse full of them because they just can't get their hands on them.
Yes.
If you were going to buy a classic car, an affordable classic car, suggest what people buy, because one car that has been suggested is the Montego and the Maestros, especially the basic ones, I think they're called city specification ones. The ones that nobody really wanted when they were 6 years old. If you were going to say to somebody, if you're going to buy a classic car, what would you suggest they go and buy? You don't have to limit it to one. Say 2 or 3. Which are the ones you would say are the ones that are affordable now that could hold the money and potentially, depending on what the government does to us all, you may be able to sell for a little bit of a profit.
Well, there are so many. The thing with selling for profit, it does depend. If you buy a car that needs a restoration, then it needs to be a high-value car when sold. But if you're buying a car that you're just going to run and enjoy and look after, then you can buy much cheaper cars. This is one of the problems I find with the fact that I write the buying guides for Classic and Sports Car magazine. I keep doing a buying guide and thinking, actually, that's a really nice car. I'd like one of those. So last year I acquired, for example, a Metro Cabriolet.
Oh, yeah.
Which had been almost completely forgotten. They only made about 1,000 of them.
I must say, when you mentioned it then, it was only then that you reminded me they used to make a Metro Cabriolet.
Exactly, yes. But they're very cheap to buy. I mean, mine does need a new floor, but I only pay £500 for it. And apart from needing a new floor, it's a good car. When I'll get around to welding in the new floor is a different question.
Yeah.
There are cars like that. Something that's a little bit different, as you say. I mean, I'm fascinated by the cars. When I was at university in the early 80s, we started a university motor club and we ran an economy run.
Yeah.
And one chap, lucky chap, had been given a brand new Volkswagen Golf Formel E by his parents for his university days.
Yeah.
And he came along on our economy run, and it was a mixed run around, we were at St Andrews, it was a mixed run around North East Fife, fairly challenging roads. And the purpose was to improve, the winner was the highest percentage improvement over the Motor or Autocar magazine average fuel consumption figure.
Yeah.
And the Golf Formel E managed 65 mpg. Which was tremendous.
I'm going to say back then that would be absolutely staggering, really, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, cars then didn't.
Back then, car manufacturers were allowed the freedom to make cars that they thought people wanted. And fuel prices were going up, so they realised people wanted economical cars. So they made cars like the Golf Formel E, the Mini Metro HLE, and these were extremely economical and efficient cars. But then the governments came in and said, oh, no, you've got to have catalytic converters, you've got to have airbags, you've got to have all this extra weight. And of course, cars have never been as economical since.
And I've often thought the catalytic converter is something of a pointless object, because when it starts to bung up, as a friend of mine calls it, you then drive your car down the road at 60 miles an hour in third gear, make sure everything gets almost white hot, and then it blows everything it's collected out the tailpipes. So it's still out there at some point in time, and it clears it all out, and off you go again. I mean, to my mind, it's one of the most pointless things ever fitted to an exhaust system.
It is. It's not a brilliant device, and of course they don't work when the engine is cold, which is actually when most cars are at the most inefficient anyway. So yes, I tend to agree with you. Since government started to get involved in trying to tell car manufacturers how to make their cars, the car manufacturers almost seem to have given up and said, "Okay, well we'll do that," and that's our only concession to efficiency and the environment. Whereas it was, I think it would have been an awful lot better if they'd been allowed to just get on with making the most efficient cars they could have done.
Well, it's also been commented on that with all what's going on with emissions, I mean, Volkswagen committed the cardinal sin as regards its emissions, and it's a case of thou shalt not get found out. But somebody, as the saying goes, bubbled them. And it was one of their rivals. But, I mean, though it hasn't come out as such with a lot of the other ones, it has with some cases, all the manufacturers were guilty of fiddling their emissions because the government suddenly put restrictions on them and limits on them that they couldn't achieve, and the only way to achieve it was to tell the onboards, by the way, when you detect one of these up your tailpipes, this is what your this is the figures you will put out. But the manufacturers were already well on their way to producing engines that had very, very low outputs.
Yes, absolutely. And yes, as I say, left to their own devices, the manufacturers can actually do a very good job. But when suddenly they get rules thrown at them that they have to comply with, it it must really destroy their self-respect and everything, really, because they've been trying so hard to produce the most efficient car they can, and suddenly they're told, no, don't do it that way, do it this way.
So basically, as regards the classic cars, how do you see the future of classic cars? Should we now all be worried about it, or do you think that somebody somewhere, and to use the phrase, common sense will prevail and politicians, of course, is a complete anathema, but do you think the classic car movement will survive?
I think it will, absolutely. But we do have to work hard to get the message out. And make sure that people don't see us as polluting and bad for the environment. We need to get the message across that we are preserving and we are reducing emissions by using older cars, and that there are ways that we can make them even more efficient, and basically keep the green lobby on our side. Because after all, this right to repair the government recently introduced with regard to electricals.
Yeah.
They now have to be repairable, parts have to be available. Well, this is exactly the situation with cars. And back in the 1960s, car manufacturers would have a department that when a new car was designed, they would take it apart. They would look at the various jobs like replacing a headlight bulb, replacing a clutch, things like that, see how long it took, and then go back to the designers and say, sorry guys, it took half an hour too long to change the clutch, we'll have to redesign it.
Yeah.
Now, these days, that doesn't happen at all. And you hear horror stories of the hours involved in just changing a headlight bulb on some cars.
Oh, well, virtually on. I won't mention the actual brand, but it's French. You have to take the entire front of the car off, to take the headlight off,
yes,
to get at the bulb. Whereas you and I are from the era when you used to open the bonnet, put your hand round the corner, and rotate that big white plastic like captive nut, and when you pulled that out, all the bulb holders came out at the same time.
Well, what makes it all the more absurd is that in France, of course, you are obliged to carry a spare bulb set with you at all times. It's fine for not carrying one.
Yeah, even though you can't change the bulb whatsoever, you need a dealer in the morning off for them to be able to do it.
Yes, yes.
Right, before we go, how do people find out about, and how do they get in touch, or how do they follow the Historic and Classic Vehicles Alliance?
Best way is go to our website, which is very simple. It's hcva.co.uk.
And we might as well give you one more plug. What's the name of your book again, and how do people get hold of a copy?
Thank you, Mark. It's called Original Jaguar E-Type by Malcolm Mackay, and you can buy it from the publishers, Porter Press, on their website, or via Amazon, or other good booksellers, I would hope. I don't think you'll find it in Waterstones yet, but you never know.
Is it selling well?
I believe it is, yes. Yes, I've heard from a lot of people who've bought copies and are happy with it so far. So it's only been out since June, so early days yet. But yes, very good reception so far.
Malcolm Mackay, thanks very much for joining me on the Backseat Driver radio show. It's fascinating to chat again after what you might call all these years. Because when we used to chat initially, it was you to ring me up and say, go and cover this and go and cover that.
That's right. Yes, a long time. But yeah, real pleasure to talk to you again, and look forward to, I hope we have a chance to chat again soon.
Malcolm Mackay, thank you very much indeed. Rarely beaten on price, never beaten on service. Whether it's cars, bikes or commercials, Hoddy Tyres are the best in the business. And when it comes to tyre expertise and advice to supplying the correct tyres for your vehicle's specific requirements, nobody comes close to David Lakin and the Hoddy Tyres team. So give them a call on 01200 613 192 or visit the website at hoddytyres.co.uk.